Well, welcome to New Tracks Meetup. Really appreciate you coming this evening. Hope you come back often and tell your friends about us. We have a website that I've talked about before at newtracksmodeling.com. That's newtracksmodeling.com. And we have a registration capability on the site. And if you'll register, then you'll get an email about all of our future meetings and train shows and events that we have. We have a train show coming up the 16th and 17th of January, 2021. We got two great sponsors, the Great Scale Model Train Show out of Timonium, Maryland, and MRH Media, LLC, Joe Fugate's organization. They've really been helpful to us in the train show. We've got the first promotion for the train show that'll be published later this week. And we hope that you'll put it on your calendar and plan to attend. This is the third one that we've had. We're learning as we go along, and we think we're getting better as we go along. So we hope you can join us on the 16th and 17th of January at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Our next My Build, moderated by Chris Course, is going to be December the 23rd. And we hope that you'll bring some models and talk about what your modeling is all about and what you're doing, and share your modeling with all of us. And if you will contact Chris ahead of time, he can try to schedule in the meeting so that we're sure that we can get to everybody who wants to participate and be a part of the My Build segment of the show. That's December the 23rd at 7 p.m. Eastern. We have now from Paul Thompson our quick tip of the evening. Paul, welcome.
Great, thank you, Jim. And tonight may be a quick tip. Dylan, can I kind of throw up the first picture there? What this is all about is many of us have gone to a hobby show and bought one of these foam cradles to put our equipment in while we tinker with it. And a lot of times I become very frustrated because the foam cradle is either too narrow, grabs a grab iron or whatever. And I've got a bit of an alternative. This stuff is called, I believe it's Easy Grab shelf liner. I got it at Walmart. Comes in various colors. I just happen to be using black here today because I was working on this. But as you can see, it's fairly flexible. And I can roll this up and make my own cradle. And this stuff is non-slip and dirt cheap. I think I got 15 feet for something like $12. And next slide, please, Dylan. This is what it looks like. It's sort of an open web. It's easily cuttable. It's machine washable. It's almost, almost a miracle at times because nothing slips on it. Next slide, please, Dylan.
Oh, right, yeah.
This is another shot of it. It's quite flexible, as you can see, and nothing really to be said about that. Next slide, please, Dylan. So this is what I did with it. I basically rolled it up into a loop, got my boxcar on it, and as you can see, you can spread it around or tighten it up. It's exceedingly flexible, and it makes a great, just a great cradle. It's not going to work with everything, and it doesn't replace the other cradle, but it's an alternative. And last slide, please, Dylan. And this is what I discovered today was this flat car has some stuff hanging up on either end of it. And half the time putting it on the cradle is just too slippy. This is ideal. And I just added this one tonight. And that basically is my tip for today. Get yourself down to Walmart, and this stuff has a million uses, and this is one of them. Thanks, guys.
I have some green.
And I will add that stuff will save you from slipping and falling on your butt.
Yes,
Ask me how I know.
And Paul, I had never thought about using this as a cradle. That's a great idea.
That is good. I like that.
I
Hey,
became
Paul, one thing-
frustrated with cradles.
Yeah, with
One
me,
thing-
the HO cradles are too small and the O scale cradles are too big.
Yeah, and half the time with all the details you have on cars now,
Yeah,
the cradles are kind of a rigid foam and they grab the details.
this stuff's great for that. I'll have to try that.
So Paul, thank you so much. We appreciate it. You're really being a helpful person here, not just giving tips, but helping people. That's great.
Hey,
Thank you,
Paul, one thing I'd add is I understand don't actually use that as shelf liner to hold your models. Joe Fugate was saying in a recent publication that he had left his models on that for about 6 months and started taking the paint off.
Yeah, I was actually, I guess I should have put that warning out there. This stuff, I don't think is something you should leave anything sitting on. To me, it's just a cradle that was temporary. If you let it sit on there for a long time, I have a sneaking suspicion it may even begin to eat some plastics.
Probably.
Yeah, it's got the same problems. If you're going to store something, you need to put plastic wrap or wax paper, something like that between, which makes it slippery again. But yeah, you'd have to compromise there somehow because this stuff will eat paint.
Yeah, I had a bunch of HO engines I put in a storage case that had foam to hold them in place. And I put them in there and, and I basically shut everything down in about 2000. I went out about a year ago to get them. They took all the paint off the side. The foam stuck to the paint. So yeah, I think that wrapping things in plastic is pretty essential.
Yep. Paper towels don't even work real long term because it'll just, whatever the oil or something is, it'll leach right through.
We may just have discovered a new way to take off paint, by the way.
If you can wait 6 months.
If you can wait 6 months to a year, yeah, absolutely. It'll take the paint off great. Otherwise, you may need a quicker way of doing it.
Yeah, it takes
I
too long.
love it. All right, thanks, Paul.
Mike, you said Mike just logged in?
Yep, he did. He
Hello,
logged in a
Mike.
couple minutes ago. His audio and video aren't
Audio
running
and
at the
video are
moment,
down,
so
Okay, thanks, Paul. I appreciate
Oh.
it.
there we go. He's popping up now. Woohoo!
So starting in January on Wednesdays, we're going to start having some special features. We're going to have Philip Richard, who's going to talk to us about building cars and locos. And I think you're really going to enjoy his presentation. When he and I talked about it, I was really impressed with how he plans to talk about his modeling and how he builds the cars and so forth. And I think you're going to enjoy it. It's going to be for 15 minutes, and it's going to be every Wednesday starting in January. Then we're going to have Jim Murphy talk to us about automation with movement, lights, and sound, and the different ways that he is doing automation for his model railroad. And I think you're going to enjoy him. And then Bob Fjord is going to talk to us about structure building techniques. And I think you're going to enjoy that. After seeing him build some of his models on the show, I know everybody's going to be interested to see how Bob is working and the way that he builds his structures. So those will be coming starting January the 1st, the first Wednesday of January. Well, tonight we have a featured modeler, Mike McNamara, and we have Chris Corse to thank for finding Mike. He told me about Mike and gave me his email and said that he had corresponded with Mike in the past, and Mike wasn't able to be on his show when he asked him to. And Mike has been kind enough to agree to join us tonight and talk to us about his model railroad. So Mike, thank you so much for coming. We were worried storm might prevent you from being here, so I'm really happy that you will be able to join us. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we've got a good amount of snow here, that's for sure. Still coming down.
I got you.
Still got power, so that's good.
So I'll turn it over to you and let you talk to us about your model railroad, the Northeast Kingdom.
Okay, sure. So I just thought I would just do a virtual layout tour and let you guys do some Q&A as we go along. I can point out a few interesting features that may be of interest to different people as we do that. So I'm doing this with my iPad. So pardon me if it moves around a bit, but I'm going to see if I can switch the camera around and head back to the, sorry about the movement here, head back to the area where you enter the layout. So let me see if I can switch the camera. Choose camera. Oh, there we go. All right. So this year, unlike most other years, I'm not able to have an open house in November, which many people throughout New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware get to do. So I thought I would kind of simulate that for you guys here. So this here, I'll back up a little bit. The entrance to my layout area in the basement. It's about half the basement. Has its own doored off area. Keeps the cats out when they're down here, which is important. So when you first come in, I'll hold it steady there so it gets a little better view for you. The first scene on my layout is as you first come in here to the layout space. So the layout overall represents areas of northern Vermont, northern New Hampshire. It's prototype based. It's not always 100% accurate with everything, but the idea was to draw upon specific scenes and areas of New Hampshire and Vermont circa 1980 as things were operationally and scenically. It's HO scale. Thanks, Clark. So I see this is cool. We get little pop-ups. That's nice. Yeah, so HO scale, and I'll get a little closer to things as we go along from here. But I'll do a basic overview of the area first. So I'm going to turn to the right here a little bit. So you can see more of the layout going down the one wall. And it's basically around the walls with a large peninsula in the center. I'm going to move around a little bit, and I'll go back to each area individually just after we kind of do a broad overview here. Okay. Basically, I'm just going to do a 180 here. Size of the room, overall, it's about 20 by 40. This one wall we're looking at here kind of cuts into that 20-foot across space. So it's 40 lengthwise up and back, and about half of the room is a full 20 feet across. The other half is anywhere from 10 to 12 feet. Okay, I'm gonna head back over here. So this area here represents Crawford Notch. Basically behind here, it goes into some staging where I kind of simulate the main central traffic that comes from Portland, Maine, comes across New Hampshire through the White Mountains, and then this is where it enters onto my layout at Crawford Notch. So this represents the cut through the rocks. I don't know if you guys have seen some pictures of that possibly. And then the tracks here at Crawford Notch are shorter, but basically the same layout. It's basically just had a passing siding and an extra siding for different things through the years. In my era, 1980, the station was in these colors and generally was boarded up. So the railroad kind of used it for storage, maintenance away, that kind of thing. There's a lot of hiking in the area. So you'd always see a lot of cars here parked, a lot of people hiking. So I tried to simulate some of that here. About a couple of years after my time period, this station was bought by the Appalachian Mountain Club and was repainted into a more colorful scheme. But mostly through the 60s and 70s, it kind of had this dark green scheme with some gray trim. Back over here. So in the back, there's a photo backdrop, and then in front of that, a large amount of trees. The trees are Scenic Express, and a lot of their ground foam and leaf material used on that. Track is generally Atlas Code 83 with Walther's Code 83 turnouts. number 5s and number 6s primarily. Now, one of the things on my layout that people usually comment on and that appears in different areas are these built-in shelves that I put under different areas. So basically, if you think about bench work with L girder and such, you know, you'll have kind of an L girder substructure and then some risers that go up. And if you kind of extend another level on top of those risers, you can create basically 2 different levels, and then you can build in a shelf like this. So that's basically what I did in a lot of areas. You'll see other parts of the layout have this as well. So it works really well to give you a place to stick things, take off any cars, you know, that are giving you trouble during an op session or something like that. So you don't have to go far from where they come from, and they don't have to sit on the layout either. So I've really enjoyed having them built in like this, and usually do get a lot of comments about it. You can see my fascia is stained birch plywood. So I know a lot of people use painted masonite, things like that, but I think it just goes well with the overall theme of the layout being in the woods, and the color seems, to me at least, work well with the general colors of the fall that I'm trying to depict. Okay, so there's a train right around here. So
I'd say that
eventually we'll catch up.
the fascia does more than just that. It looks beautiful. I mean, that's the type of fascia I would want to do, because it's just it's beautiful. I don't know how else to say it.
Thank you. Yeah, I found it easy to work with. I mean, generally I bought the 2x4 sheets of the really thin, I guess 1/8 inch birch plywood, and cut it to size. I used stainless steel screws to kind of put it in place, and then stained it. And yeah, it's worked out really well. Okay, as I was saying, there's a train running around here. I think it'll catch up to us eventually, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift this up to see the area that generally you wouldn't see without some sort of assistance. Yeah, there's the train there. So that's some of the staging that's behind their layout. What I really would have liked to have done was had a walkway back there, so that I could walk around and get to it, just for general access. It's not like I have to do a lot back on that staging area, but I decided to compromise in making the aisles wider, and you can see there's an area back there where I can pop up underneath. And then the rest of this, if I get on a step stool, I can reach over top and get to any of the 6 tracks that are there. In general, it's not been a problem. There are re-railers in there, and I haven't had any issues. I can get to all the tracks to clean them, which I can talk about that a little bit later. But this train is coming around through Crawford Notch, so I'll head back over here so you guys get a view of it. So in my time period, there was a train daily that went from Portland to St. Johnsbury, which we can get to in a little bit. This is where this train will terminate during one time of the day. And then later on, train would head back from St. Johnsbury to Portland. I'm going to set this down and stabilize it a little bit for you guys here. These are U18Bs. So Maine Central is one of the few railroads that had them. These are the Intermountain models. I recently just changed out all the sound on these to Loc sound from the QSIs that it came with from the factory. So I like that a lot better. I think I only have sound on in 2 of them right now because it is fairly noisy when all 4 of them are on there, and I don't want to drown out me talking when these things came by. So and this is the train basically as it's staged for operating sessions. There's about 17 cars on here. The prototype would have anywhere from 4 to 6 units and about 50 cars. So obviously scaling that down a little bit for the layout. On the back track is an RS11. The Maine Central had 2 of those. That has a Loc sound in it as well. Just give you another view of this, and we'll move on to the next area of the layout. Okay. So from here, the main central would travel from Crawford Knox through Twin Mountain and into Whitefield. And the next area I have on the layout is Whitefield, as I represented it. We had an operating ball signal with the crossing with the Boston and Maine. So basically trains would come here and they would be required to stop and change the ball signals for each train to pass. This is, light density backwoods railroading, so it wasn't anything that really needed to be controlled by a dispatch or anything like that. But, high visibility to see the ball signal from far away, that they could stop if necessary if they didn't have the signal. So, and yeah, this would all be pre-Guilford. So Guilford was 1983. Well, I guess actually 1981 for Maine Central, and then 83 for Boston and Maine. So I'm representing like 1980. So it's kind of the height of the operations at that time period with some of the other railroads, which you'll see on the layout. Scenario here with some scenery that's still in progress. Working on a mill kit to go back behind here. And then over here, I have a representation of downtown Whitefield. The bridge in the background is not something that actually existed. They didn't cross over the Boston and Maine, so it's something I had to kind of fit in here just to make the scene work. So the track here at the crossing is the Boston and Maine track that came from from the crossing at the ball signal and heads up to paper mills in Groveton and Berlin. So these are a couple of kits which you may or may not recognize. A couple Woodland Scenics. The other one is the older, I'm trying to remember the guy in North Jersey who put these kits together. I did get some of the, I can zoom in over here. This gray building back here has those interiors from the guys, yeah, Mine Mount, you're correct, that is right. The interiors from Canada, I'm blanking on the name here, but they're pretty cool. You just basically cut them out and kind of glue them as little boxes, and they fit inside the different Woodland Scenic structures. So they add a lot of nice depth to the scene, and they come with the lighting as well. And then the bar itself is not that way. I just kind of made that myself. I am a musician. I do play music, and yeah, roomettes, thank you. And so I do have a band in there. It might be a little hard to see. Get a little lower, but there's a band playing inside the bar there, which is something I'm familiar with doing. Not a whole lot this year, but other years, something I do regularly. And then the Mine Mount kit also came with interior details. And this was a house from I think Mount Blue Models, something I picked up at Springfield. That's a really good look for like New England or Appalachian areas. Went together really well. It's a really well made kit.
You want me to go over and talk to him?
Back over here. That's a best trains kit for Boston and Maine Freight Depot. Didn't have one here in Whitefield in my time period. So I just kind of took a little modeler's license there. It just helps fill out the back area a little bit so it doesn't look so empty. So I had a little bit of space for it. Up front here, some pulpwood loading. So there's a lot of that in various lines throughout New England, Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, so that you can see that in different places. I wanted to simulate some of that activity. That shows up in more than one spot. Highball is not operational. I didn't see a whole lot of need for it, but I know that some people have done that with like tortoise machines and kind of a stiff wire. You can go up and down with it. This also is a best trains kit combination, the shanty and the ball signal, as well as this building over here, which was the trackside speeder shed, that kind of thing here. So it was a nice little kit, went together well. Back up a little bit here. That's another one of those shelves there. And just talk about this over here for a second. So a couple different spots. I'm using the touch toggles. So basically, this is a basic 5x7 frame, and it did some artwork on the computer and printed out in color. And basically, taped on the back of there are the little squares that Barrett Hill sells for touch toggles. And basically, just touch anywhere on here, spots. Maybe you can hear the tortoise throwing back there. But there's a light. It's a little hard to see, I think, with the glare, but they do light up green for the route that you see. So those white dots are either white or green, green for that direct. But it works really well. You just touch it quickly and it throws a switch. So it's nice, easy for the operators to understand, and nothing sticks out too far from the layout. You can recess this. I have it in a different one back there. You can see when I get around the corner a little bit, kind of mount it right to the side of the fascia. This one I kind of stuck out at an angle, but I like them really, really well. This is a model that I did actually work on this year, one of those 2020 stuck at home things. So anybody who follows Mike Confalone may have seen him post something about this, but it's a telephone pole load. Basically, it's a whole mess of dowels. It's a converted Walther's car. These side extensions here are styrene, so they're added on some extra decals on there for markings, but it's basically a loose load. Everything on here just sits here. And more of these poles to kind of simulate an unloading area over here. So I just have to finish that up. Right now, it's just a road leading to that area. So that needs to be finished up, and that would kind of finish this area, except for maybe some more scenery. I was recently just working on this scenery here. It was kind of flat in the front here, so I added a lot of wild grass. I was doing that here as well. So those are easy little things to do once you get to the point where you can do scenery. You kind of go back and work on things, enhance them. Okay, so moving down the layout here, the main central went through this tunnel here and it's kind of hidden for a while to pop out after this next scene. But this track here is a drop bridge in front of a closet that I had to kind of leave in place. This is the Boston to Maine track that comes through that ball signal, curves around and comes down. You can see about 6 inches or so from the main central level track. And that's coming here to this paper mill representing Groveton. And this is kind of the end of the line. So that train comes here to basically drop off cars, do a little servicing of the paper mill that's here. I'm going to back up a little bit. Let's build into this corner of the layout here. I'll talk about that upper shelf in a second. So this is a large wood chip pile, which was there in Groveton, fed the paper mill. And this is obviously a scaled down version, but it has some similar elements. It did have some old brick buildings as well as newer steel and cinder block, and it was painted in a similar scheme. I added on these car sheds leading into the paper mill itself, just for a little bit more interest instead of just having loading doors on the outside. There were a lot of covered loading, I guess, due to weather, things like that. This is not fully completed yet. There's some more things with these KLN tanks. I'd like to build out piping and stuff like that, but the base scenery is in place. And it's a fun little spot to operate. It's a nice job. It's just the Boston to Maine train comes out of staging through the ball signal down the hill here, and then you got all by yourself, no one to bother you train wise. Anyone else, you can just come here and work on this job for a while. Now, above this was somewhat unplanned, but I kind of found a way to fit in, I guess what you call a second level, but it's not truly a double deck layout. Back from the Whitefield area, there was a main central track that diverted off of the mountain subdivision, which is what this represents, this Portland and St. Johnsbury, and it went up to North Stratford and Beecher Falls, and cut off, diverted at a place called Quebec Junction prior to hitting Whitefield. And I found a way to put a switch in and go a very gradual uphill on that area behind Whitefield. So it's going behind that short backdrop there, gradually going up through this closet and then popping out here to this level. And this represents North Stratford and the interchange there with the Grand Trunk and the North Stratford Short Line Railway, which was in operation in the late 70s to the early 80s. So there's a few tracks here. Tracks are in, track is painted to a certain extent, no scenery yet. There's a station for the North Stratford Grand Trunk, so you can see a different color on that. That's more of a Canadian national standard. And then these tracks go around here on this shelf. Shelf gets narrower and leads to Beecher Falls, which is the end of the line there. And at this time, it was operated by the North Stratford Railway Company, which had these really cool New Hampshire state logo boxcars. They had a total of 100 of them, and they were acquired in the 70s. A lot of railroads, getting rid of their 40-foot boxcars. So these were slightly worked on to rehab them to a certain extent. In some cases, new doors, things like that. But they were still old 40-foot boxcars. They serviced the Ethan Allen Furniture Company that was at Beecher Falls. So a lot of furniture sub-assemblies, things like that, would come out of the factory here. So I still have to build the factory building as part of it. And then I do have they ran a 44 punter and an S1, which I could build at some point. I do have the models for it. I just haven't painted them yet. So that could just run as a short interchange over at North Stratford. But for now, the main central local out of North Stratford would do the switching there. So basically, this operationally, someone goes on station here, does the local switching, assembles the train, and then heads to St. Johnsbury, which we'll get to in a bit. You may have seen in the background there a little bit of that train that was going by. This is the same main central train after St. Johnsbury. It heads back to that staging yard. So it forms a loop by doing that. So operationally, I don't usually do this, but for an open house or anytime I just want to run trains, this has its own separate loop that I can just run around and around. So it's very convenient. These backdrops are from Lark, L-A-R-C, guy out of central New York. He does sell them at Springfield Show, but he also has a website. So basically they are photos taken, and each one is an individual Word document page, which you can print off, and then if you cut right on the edges, each page will line up with each other. I printed them on full sheet adhesive paper. Let me get closer here. And basically just stuck them to the wall. So the top up here, I cut with kind of kid scissors to give it like a rougher edge, so it's not just straight. And then you can see here, yes, there's a good link somebody just posted there, Chris. So there is a seam right here, and there's a seam right there. So when you do it well, they're a little hard to see, but when you get up close, you can sometimes see them. But he has them available on CD-ROM. I don't know if he still does that. You also do custom printing too if you want a large one. You could assemble the images yourself once you have it into a larger print as well. So these are just printed on inkjet printer, and I gave them a light coat of clear finish just to protect them a little bit. So they're in a few different places throughout the layout here. I find they add a lot of depth, even when like a scene like this where there's no scenery. especially when you get down a little bit. You know, it just kind of looks like there's a lot more to the scene than meets the eye. Okay, so yeah, this was the end of the Boston and Maine branch, but right back over here, little scenery still to get in place here, but this track in the front is where the Maine Central comes next after Whitefield. You cross the Connecticut River into Vermont, and this is Gilman, Vermont, which on the lower level here, which is a large paper mill also in my time period. So a lot of that is to be built at this point, but I have a somewhat mocked up. I have the track in place. Here's another two of the touch toggle panels. The one there for Newport is hidden staging, which I can talk to in a minute. The other one here is for Gilman itself. There's only a couple touch toggles, and then there's also, sorry, I'm moving too fast there. There's also some Caboose Industries hand throws. So this has a local job that comes and switches out cars here. Okay, and then Maine Central continues along through here. And the cat has come to visit, I see. Yes. So on this upper level here, it's not really a level, but it's a little higher than the track in front of me, is the Maine Central continues along to East St. Johnsbury, where there was Maple Grove Farms, where they make syrup and other things like that, was located here. Right now, it's an older Walthers building I've had for a long time, just kind of sitting there. But it actually looks similar to the prototype. Oops, cat just jumped. There's a prototype picture there. All those cans there are for maple syrup. They're kind of like beer kegs, but you can see there's some similarities to this building. But ideally, I would get some components and build it more flatter to the wall. But for now, it gives me a little something to hold this spot. And then in front, there is this somewhat newer looking cement distribution. In the time I took the picture, it was no longer receiving any cars or anything like that. But I thought it'd be a good idea to have another place there to receive some traffic. And then in front there is another pulpwood loading siding. So to the front is actually part of the Canadian Pacific. So I'm going to hold off on talking about that for a second. We'll come back. So the Maine Central here wraps around. I'll back up a little bit. So you can see kind of all the way back down there to Gilman, East St. Johnsbury. And it comes around the bend here, and then this is St. Johnsbury. Okay, so if you've seen pictures, you may recognize this particular view. This is Route 2, crosses over the mouth of the yard, and the ET and HKI'd feed mill building was there, so it's very, very well-known signature kind of structure. So you can see here, I have two. So the one here to the left that's white is actually styrene. It's one that I'm building. The one that's here now is actually just a mock-up. It's printed photos on foam core board. So it's one of the, after I got the scene going, it's one of the first things I did was kind of put this in place. So I do want to get it built as an actual structure. So that's kind of what I'm working on in the background there. And then there was a coal shed here, so that's done. So let's back up a little bit more here so you can get a better view. So pretty much everything that operates on the layout runs through this yard. So this is a busy place. For operating sessions, we put two operators here. So one guy kind of is the engineer and for locomotive, and the other guy kind of does the handling of the waybills and the planning and keeping track of things. And it seems to have worked out pretty well. The guys do enjoy it as a dual job. These are two other buildings that are there and a lot of photos. One's obviously just a mock-up at this point. Requires quite a few chichi windows, which I do have. I just have to kind of sit down and start building this. It should be a little bit longer and a little bit lower than this mock-up. And then Allen Lumber was more like a shed there, but that was a pretty dynamic, or I mean, a signature kind of scene building as well, because coming down the hill out of St. Johnsbury, you're kind of going straight at these two buildings. So they show up in a lot of photos as well. The track work here is relatively accurate. It's just scaled down a little bit. There's less yard tracks, and everything's condensed a little bit. I kind of built everything exactly like this. The other main difference here is the Canadian Pacific track is in the front to the left here, and the Main Central is the one on the right going under the bridge. Canadian Pacific went straight north at that point, and the Main Central curved off. So, but for me, I didn't want to have any duck unders or anything, so I ran it around the bend as well. So we can take a look at that in a second. Okay, so this is the yard here. I have basically 3 tracks to handle operations. There was more like 12 tracks in the yard, and it went for a good distance in the south. This is looking south. Operationally, the Main Central would come here, would terminate, power would lay over, and the return train would be built to go back to Portland, Maine. Most of the traffic would come from the Canadian Pacific. The Canadian Pacific was coming out of Montreal via Newport, Vermont. So trains from Newport would come down through St. Johnsbury and would continue down all the way to East Deerfield on the Boston and Maine, all along the Connecticut River. So one thing that they did between East Deerfield and Newport was they would pool power. So you'd see a lot of Boston and Maine and Canadian Pacific power together on these trains. In some cases, they would run 2 cabooses as well, one for each railroad, depending on what was going on operationally. So I try to simulate some of that with operations and staging. There's some trains that run through here with power of both railroads. So just turning back here. So this is the yard, and it goes through the backdrop here, and then that area there is behind the paper mill at Gilman we were just looking at. So kind of these tracks terminate there. The track on the bottom is the Canadian Pacific going to staging, which is also the track that the Main Central was using to get back to that staging yard. So it's a double-ended staging yard. One direction basically represents Canadian Pacific from the south, and the other one represents Main Central. But because it's connected, it creates one big loop. So that's worked out well to have that. Okay. So before we get to the other side, let's talk about the Canadian Pacific for a second. So that track that goes around here to the front is the Canadian Pacific. This is going back to the area we just came from. So there's one town here before it hits staging, and that's Lindenville, which had a small little industrial park. The track here is somewhat temporary for now, but it's a nice flat area that's worked out very well to put things and work on things. So I tend to not finish anything here because I like having the space to work. And then you can see a lot of the exposed bench work and stuff here. But the track going straight goes into a 4-track staging yard for Canadian Pacific. The track to the right off of that turnout, as well as the other track you see hidden there, is all part of the Lamoille Valley, which was a railroad that ran across the top of Vermont. And that's kind of where we go next. So the Lamoille Valley operated what was previously the St. Johnsbury and Lamoille County, or St. Johnsbury and Lake Champlain, depending on the era. It's about 96 miles across the top of Vermont from St. Johnsbury to Connecticut, or the Central Vermont connection in St. Albans. So this represents that railroad in 1980. You can see that's their color scheme and font there. This was their milepost 0. So they came into the yard here. They would terminate with trains, and then they would return back. So they did some interchange with the Main Central and some with the Canadian Pacific. Trains are generally pretty short. It's a short line. So that track goes there, and it's kind of hidden behind the trees here. There is a scene in front, which I'll talk about later. Okay, so that comes around. So I've done like a 180 here, just to give you an overview of where we're at here. That's the yard to the right. So this here's the Lamoille Valley, across Vermont. So this is Hardwick, Vermont. There's one of those laser art structures. I was kind of using it as a an older building that's not getting service at this point. So I was playing around with getting a lot of weeds overgrown on the tracks and everything. But I was going to represent maybe it's being used for a team track. So a little bit of service there for a box car or the truck to back up to it. One of the big things in Hardwick was the gravel company. There's a prototype picture down there. So they pulled a lot of gravel out of there for doing the roadbed rehab that happened in the late 70s. So there's a lot of ballast trains. So I've simulated some of that action on the layout as well. So I do have some empties and loaded ballast cars. I basically feed them over to the main central as if they were getting some ballast for some of the work in New Hampshire. So I have some dedicated ballast trains that'll come here, do some switching of empties and loaded, and then head over to St. Johnsbury. Okay, so these are a few other things. This is a kit that I picked up at Springfield a couple of years ago and didn't know where to stick it. And I found just enough space on the edge of the layout here to get it in to represent a station at Hardwick. So it's one of those not prototypical things, but kind of does capture the feel of the area. This is Route 15 in Vermont. So a few different kit buildings through here. Post office building that my wife built, actually. So Lamoille Valley had 4 different RS3s that they acquired from Delaware and Hudson that were redone and then painted into this kind of reverse Rutland scheme. So Rutland's usually green with yellow stripes. They were yellow with green stripes. These would have been about 2 years after painting. So they should have a little bit more weathering. Right now, they just have kind of a flat finish on them without too much else, but extra details added. These are recent Atlas ones that came out. I've actually painted a lot of these before Atlas did their own scheme on these, but a lot of people, after I painted them, a lot of people wanted their own, people from different areas of the country. So I ended up probably have done about 20 of them, even though they've only had 4. Mailed off a whole mess of them to other people. Did have a covered bridge. Used to be a picture of that on the fascia, but I think I took that away at some point. So Fisher Covered Bridge, which is still there today. It's a National Historic Landmark. This line is not operational anymore. They removed the rails, but it's a snowmobile trail now, but this covered bridge is still there. It's been rehabbed. So this is I believe it's New England Scale Models makes this kit as a laser cut. And it's really pretty accurate. The major difference with this is the siding on this goes horizontal and the siding on the bridge actually went vertical. So that could be changed. I just didn't think to go that route when I built it many years ago. It's a river seam. We have plenty of cows of Vermont, plenty of cows. And curving around about the midway of the railroad was Marsville, where they had shops, they had a small yard, and a few industries. So I've kind of modeled that here. It's a little bit freelance. It has a few more tracks than the prototype to kind of support more operations. So that's one of the places I took a liberty with, just to make things a little bit more interesting for having guys over for an op session. Yes, that's right, Jack. Jack has been here. He has operated on this layout and seen it. So it's one of the few guys on the call, I guess, who's actually been here. Maybe some others have too, I don't know. But yeah, Jack, I appreciate you having come here and operated. I'm glad to have had you. So some more stuff to build here, some buildings and backdrop, things like that. They have a shop building there. I have a few pictures up in the background there, but that's to be built out. So that track curves around, starts to descend here as it heads to staging, basically. But before it gets there, passes through this higher elevation, which I kind of simulated as an early fall snowstorm, or at least snow dusting. So a little less than we're getting today, but a little more than we'd usually get in October. The track curves around and heads to a staging area that represents St. Albans, Vermont. Before it gets there, there's one other scene, which is somewhat still in progress. There's a talc mill there, Eastern Magnesia Talc. So there's a large building here. I have a few pictures of it. It is right here down there in that black and white. So it's some large silos and some other buildings. So I'm planning to put that in this spot here. But I have finished the background. So there's a road there, as well as more of the photo backdrop. And that kind of takes you back to where we first came in. That's the opening, the doorway there. And then that's the chair that the cat knocked over when she left. Okay. And then one other scene, that Memorial Valley that comes back underneath of this section, which is on its way to staging, it does pop out one more time over here. So it comes out through here, some unfinished scenery here, and then crosses over to central Vermont, which is something that it did do in Sheldon Junction. And in my time period, instead of continuing on to a different interchange point with the central Vermont, it would actually cross over here, not go through the diamond, and then head into St. Albans, Vermont directly to do the interchange there. Just save some work for the central Vermont. So I kind of simulated that here. I do have some central Vermont power and track. There's not a lot modeled here though, but the Memorial Valley does get the chance to switch out this paper mill. I mean, this grain facility here. And that's just kind of a stand-in as well. It's not really accurate to what it looks like. So that's the Walther's kit. So when I get around to it, I can rebuild that. Okay. So that's about it for the layout tour. Some other things, like someone commented on wide aisles. So yeah, I consciously made things wider. This is about 5 feet across here. So if you have somebody working on each side, you can still get a third person to walk past here. Same thing over here. It's not quite as wide here. This is a little less than 4 feet at this tightest point here, but then it opens back up at that end. And then really the tightest point is right about here between these two spots here, but 2 people can easily still fit through here. It is in the basement. Pardon me, I picked this up for a second. It is in the basement, so you have to come down about 4 steps. So it is tough to get a wheelchair here, I guess, unless someone would help you down the stairs, I guess. But it's not a ramp or anything, and it's not direct to the outside. What else can we talk about? Layout skirting, just some fabric my wife put together. So they're just panels that kind of hide everything underneath. Operationally, uses waybills, car cards. Car cards are in plastic sleeves. And then waybills basically have a number of informational things on them, but in general, the things that are highlighted in yellow are the things that are most important to the operator. That's where is the car going, location-wise on the layout, and then at that particular town, which industry is it going to? So those are highlighted. And then in the upper right-hand corner, you can see orange and blue here. They represent assistance for the yardmaster in St. Johnsbury as to which railroad is basically going to. So the orange color is Maine Central, the blue is Boston and Maine. So when these cars head back to the yard, it just helps the operator know a little bit quicker, like how to quickly classify the cars before he figures out which train it actually goes to, or know which railroad it goes to. This layout does represent essentially 4 different railroads in operation at the same time. It's not just one main line. For an operating session, I had 5 or 6 people, and then myself, I just kind of float around and help direct things. But 2 people in the St. Johnsbury yard, 1 person in Morrisville, the Memorial Valley yard, and then 2 or 3 guys running trains out on the layout. So it's slower pace. There's not too many live meets or anything like that. It's usually 1 or 2 trains at a time going on the layout. And then the guys working the yards stay fairly busy most of the time. They get a couple breaks here and there. I have not had an op session in a while, but I guess that's the way it is for everyone. So at that point, I can probably turn it over if there's any other questions. I know we've answered a few based on the chat, which is kind of cool. I don't know if anybody else has anything else they want to ask specifically or talk about.
So you say there's 4 steps. Is that like 4 steps from the outside or from the rest of the house or what?
Yeah, so there's a side door entrance on the garage.
Oh, okay.
So you come in through the garage, and then at that point, you're about halfway between the basement level and the first level. So you're already kind of at a lower level than the first floor. So from there, you go down 4 steps, and then you're at the basement level. You go up 4 steps, then you're at the first level. So it's not a lot of steps, which is good, I guess.
Yeah.
Kind of see back here. This is a window. Basically, it's to the outside. So you can see it's much larger than most windows in a basement. And that's because we're only about 4 feet into the ground. And then the other 4 feet or so up is above ground. So the basement's only about halfway in the ground.
Cool.
Your knowledge of the area seems extensive. Are you from that part of the country?
No, we did a lot of family vacations growing up. This is where I did a lot of rail fanning early on in the 70s and 80s. And then, being very interested in that area, basically just did a lot of research with books, and there were some very good magazine articles specific to this area that really gave you a lot of information. So
You look like you put a lot of knowledge into the layout. You really captured the area very much. I'm from the other end of the Connecticut River down in Massachusetts, and you've really captured the flavor of New Hampshire, Vermont, and the Northeast Kingdom.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, one of the biggest things, modeling the fall, I was just concerned about the colors. I tried some different ground foams and things, and the ones I came up with were some of the Scenic Express ones, which I think have worked better because they're a bit more muted in color, so not as bright. And I tried to mix in a lot of greens as well. So I think that has helped a bit. So it's definitely peak foliage time, but it's not, I think, too over the top. So that's what I was going for. There's still plenty more to do. Start the layout in 2003. But basically, 2 younger kids at the time. So working on the layout time would happen basically at different time spurts of activity and times of inactivity. So after about 16 or so years, I would like to be a little further along, but it is fully operational and can support operating sessions, which is good, and has a large amount of scenery. It's just not every area is 100% done, but some of them are very close, and other ones have at least enough scenery, I think, that it makes it enjoyable experience for guys who do come and operate or visit. So back over here, see the trains back out. There's the other cat.
Now, for the fall scenery, have you thought of having it sort of like slightly different between the quote north end and the southern end? Say like have the southern end, it's like mostly still green, and then have the north end, pretty much past
Yeah.
past it.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about because I've experienced that myself, and actually I've kind of not done that. I've been in this area right here that we're looking at. This is Crawford Notch. That will lose all its leaves and kind of be totally sparse, where if you just go a little bit further south, you know, everything's still at like peak foliage. So I decided not to do that, just to kind of keep it the same. It is mainly a east and west layout, and that most of what you see is about the same area latitude wise, but there are some elevation changes. So this is definitely a high elevation point here in Crawford Notch. That would be kind of what you were talking about, you know, kind of less foliage, but I kind of kept it the same. Makes it a little bit easier. I'm making a bunch of trees, just kind of make them all, and then they just get sucked up onto the layout, different spots. Yeah, a lot of spline. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
From my understanding, that highball signal is or was the last operating highball signal in the United States.
Yeah, that's what I've read also. There was the article in 1980, you know, that I read in RMC mentioned it being the last one at that time as well. So I know into the early 90s, it was still being used because there was Guilford trains coming up through there, and there was a different local railroad running down from Groveton. So they would still make use of it. But it's all still there right now. Obviously, operationally, the main central line is operated by the Conway Scenic. So occasionally they do run trains as far as this. And then there's also the New Hampshire and Vermont Railway, which does still operate in the area. I just don't know whether they really are active anymore. But the track is all still there. It is used. A year or two ago, they did have they moved an Amtrak. Not Amtrak, I'm sorry. They moved like a special movement through Crawford Notch and through this area. So there's a lot of pictures of that from a few years ago. Those big long loads.
Mike, have you built the railroad basically all by yourself?
A lot of it. I did have some help early on from somebody. I think during the call, I saw a comment pop there from my friend Anton. He was definitely helping me early on this particular St. Johnsbury Peninsula. We did a lot of the bench work and stuff. So he was helpful there until he decided to move away to Maryland and stop helping me. So before that, he was a good help.
Yep.
But since then, yeah, I've done a lot basically by myself.
Do you have a favorite manufacturer of the cars that you run on your railroad?
Not really. It's really just more based on things that fit the time period or paint scheme of that would be found in use in 1980 in this part of New Hampshire and Vermont. So I definitely have a lot of different things. Going back to Atherton Blue Box, some things I worked on many years ago, but then, you know, Bowser and AccuRail, Tangent, a few Exact Rail, Atlas, Intermountain. So a real variety of freight cars.
How about your track cleaning? Do you have any secrets?
Yeah, I was going to mention something about that. So in South Jersey here, a couple of the guys latched onto the fact that you can clean your track with alcohol and sorry, checking something there. You can clean your track with alcohol and then go over top of it with CRC 2-26, kind of a conductor spray for electronics. What it does is it ends up sealing the rails from oxidation, and it's worked really well. I did the whole layout before we started doing some formal operating sessions, and I have not really cleaned all of the track since then. I've cleaned a few spots here and there. I've cleaned locomotive wheels, but the track itself has been sealed with the CRC 226, and it's worked really well at keeping everything running operationally. So I think it's due, especially because I haven't run a lot of stuff this year. It's probably due for another good cleaning, so I maybe take it back down with alcohol and resurface everything. But basically, you know, clean it with an alcohol block, and then I use a piece of Homosote. I spray the CRC 226 on there and just kind of rub it back and forth until it gets a good coating on it, and then just kind of let it dry overnight. I think I have a can of that here. Find it real quick. Yep, there we go. Sorry about the spinning there. So that's it there.
Who makes
So
that? Where do you buy it?
So I bought this. I found that Home Depot had it, actually. I was surprised. You can probably get it other places, but I checked and they actually had it. So it's electrical contact cleaner, basically, or protectant. And
Yeah, it used to be
works really
used a
well.
lot by TV places and so forth. You can find it at electronic stores. I think Amazon may even have it.
Yeah, it's popular. Yeah.
I know I've seen something similar like that the techs have used at work. On like old stuff that you have like an old style contactor.
Mm.
I know Andy
like
keeps.
relays.
I think Andy keeps a bottle of that stuff in his truck. Uses it on those. I think he uses it on air conditioners too, like when you need to make sure the contact strips are working.
There's a set of relays on the wheelchair here that operate the electric brakes, and people have used it for that kind of product on that. Anytime you've got two contacts that try to spark, which is what our wheels are doing, it works really well.
How do you put it on the track, Mike?
Yeah, so I sprayed onto like a piece of Homosote, like a little block, maybe like a 1 inch by 1 inch square, and then just kind of take that and rub it back and forth, you know, for about, like spraying it on there, maybe do like a 6 foot area. You'll start to feel it. It'll start to go with a little bit of resistance at first, and then it'll get very smooth as it kind of puts a coating on there. And then just kind of move on to the next section. So, and then you'll be able to see it. Probably won't show up here, but the rail itself will get kind of a yellowish color on top. So it won't be totally shiny. It'll look a little duller, and that's when you know you kind of have it on there pretty well. And the big thing is just to kind of let it dry overnight, let it totally seal it up. And I've also taken to cleaning the locomotive wheels with alcohol and then doing the same thing, spraying some of it on a piece of paper towel and then running the locomotive wheels through it as well. So they're also have a coating on it. And between the two, it's worked really well.
How long a paper towel do you put to make sure the wheels get all the way around?
So yeah, I just do like one of those half sheets, you know, that you can get, and I just kind of run up on there. I just keep moving it to different spots. You'll see the darkness coming off. Even the wheels that have been coated, that dark crud stuff does still show up. It just doesn't seem to affect the electrical conductivity anymore. So, but I just kind of do it in different spots on the paper towel until it starts to show clean. And then I'll use a different paper towel with the CRC 226 on it, just to make an area wet and just run the wheels quickly through there, just so they get something on them. Now I'll just let the locomotive sit overnight.
Mike, did you find that it attracted any dust or dirt like afterward?
No, nothing like that at all. So.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
How often do you have to treat the track, Mike?
I can tell you some of the areas on this layout have not been done in 4 years. So it works really well. Other areas, you know, especially if you do some scenery or something, you have to go back over and obviously deal with that. But some of the hidden track, like the staging yard, was done and I haven't touched it since. But I'm thinking I wouldn't mind doing it because it's been a long time. One of the other guys in this area, I think someone asked where are we at, or where am I at? I'm in Delran, New Jersey, which is near Morristown, a few miles outside Philadelphia. But one of the guys that was out in Morristown, he was kind of seeing how long he could go without doing anything to his track. And he had regular monthly operating sessions, more than I was having. But I don't know how long he went. I know he was up to 2 years without doing anything to any of his tracks. So it definitely lasts a long time. Because it used to be I would clean the track before an open house, and then a couple hours into the open house, and it was, I was already starting to get like, especially with sound units, would start dropping out. So I see somebody from Cape May. So yeah, I think you guys are getting more rain than we got more snow. Although it is raining now, or frozen something hitting the windows.
Somebody put a link in here to Home Depot where they have it. I don't know if the link's actually working because it's all butchered, but
Well, this sounds like a real fantastic product as far as I can tell. I mean, not to have to clean your track for a couple of years. I love that idea.
Yeah, I've had a success, and most, the other guys that do operations here in South Jersey, they've all had the same success. So it hasn't been unique to, my layout or my humidity level or anything like that. Other guys have had just as much success. So it does seem to work. And I know in MRH Magazine, it's one of the things that Joe Fugate had talked about. He mentioned some other things that work even better, but this one has worked for us. So
How do you like the touch toggle screens?
yeah, I think they're great. They work really well. This is the most complex one. There's, I think, 19 of them on here. This is an 8 by 11 frame. So this was the hardest one to do because you kind of have to get everything to fit onto one panel. Obviously, smaller panels are easier to do with only a couple on there, but it works really great. The guys liked it. When I first started doing op sessions, I had the turnouts controlled by DCC decoder, so they had to basically dial them up and throw them back and forth, and they didn't like that at all. So, and I can understand as you're doing work, kind of takes away from what they're used to. So guys seem to like hand throws or some sort of control panel type mechanism. So I think this is a good solution. It saves on having to really build out a control panel, a lot of switches and wiring, and it's very easy and component wise to just kind of put it together. There's different modules that you can hook together basically to build as many as you need in one local area. And then they have wires with extenders. So it's all very easy to put together, modular. You don't really have to do any soldering or anything like that yourself. And converting the existing tortoises that I had over was easy too. So basically it's just, taking the wires that throw it and hooking them up to the control module that the touch toggles connect to. And if you get it backwards, it's easy to just change it right at that point with screw connections. You don't have to worry about rewiring the turnout itself, or the tortoise itself.
What about maintenance of the screen and all of that? Is that a lot of maintenance for them?
Nah, nothing. It's best to clean the screen when it's off, because if you do touch it, you will quickly start throwing some turnouts there, because it doesn't take a lot, just very quickly like that. I think here you can see the green a little better. So, you just put your finger on it quickly and it just throws. So it's very sensitive, but you do have to be near it. So it's not like it just picks up anywhere on the screen. You kind of have to be over the area of the actual touch toggle itself.
I got you.
But yes, yeah, definitely, Chris. Stuff like that just makes layout, building, and operations a lot more fun.
Who manufactured that A-frame that you have?
That's a good question. I won that at a Northeast Region convention, one of those raffle items, when you put your tickets in, and I can't remember who made it, but I built it like right away, and I kind of had it sitting and didn't know what to do with it. Then eventually I just found that, I could kind of make a scene out of this. So the, it's laser cut, and the roofing material is like a printed sheet. So it's more 2-dimensional than 3-dimensional. But with the snow on it, it kind of becomes less of an issue. And I think I just used, it's wood, and I think I just used like Minwax pens to kind of color it. I didn't even paint it. It was very quick and easy to get together, but I can't remember who manufactured it. But it came like in a blister pack plastic. It was probably like 12 years ago that I put it together.
Yeah, I would have guessed a faller kit, but that doesn't really sound like it.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not. It is laser cut wood.
It's a nice A-frame though.
Yeah, it's really cool.
I like the little Jeep. Or is that's an FJ, isn't it?
I think it's something that precedes that, but yeah, it's one of those Toyota type vehicles. You got a view of it there. It's just like real Vermont. You can't get a good picture because there's a tree in the way.
Down here, it's not trees in the way. It's saguaro cactus in the way.
Oh. Everyone has their own. So I would run more trains, but it's hard to do the iPad and running trains at the same time. But one guy on the loop by himself is easy to let it go.
Do you run off of a scale clock during your op session?
No, it's really just more sequential. So it's just a matter of having a list of trains and basically just going through them on a set schedule, essentially from like real time, keep things spaced out, that kind of thing. But just let it go at an easy pace for the guys. There we go. See if we get this guy running here. So Memorial Valley also has its own separate loop, so I can run both of these at the same time without really too much oversight. So
I noticed you had 5 of those RSs on your layout, not just 4.
You're pretty good. Yes, there's a 5th one over here. So a little bit later on, they did acquire a 5th one from the Delaware and Hudson. So they were numbered 7801 through 7805. 78 being the year that they acquired the first one, and they just did them sequentially. But they did get a 7805 later, and they also did chop noses on them as well. I don't have any of them done as chop noses.
I've seen that somewhere.
Yeah.
Did they ever put 251s in it to replace the engine, or?
I don't think so, not to my knowledge.
Yeah, GBW did that very stealthily. They just put however many inch strip at the bottom below the hood along the whole locomotive. They raised the whole locomotive a few inches.
Yeah.
And with a glance, you couldn't tell that it had been upgraded. Of course, they did chop nose at the same time too.
Yeah, sure. One thing that's interesting is that in the, I guess, mid 80s, when after the Main Central shut down their operations and traffic kind of dried up on the Memorial Valley, they sold off a few of their RS3s, and one of them actually came to South Jersey and ran from Glassboro, I think, down to I'm trying to think of the spot there, but it ran through Woodstown and down towards Salem, I think. So it was actually still in the same yellow scheme, and I think it was called West Jersey Railroad. They just put some new lettering on it. So you may have seen pictures of that. So yeah, that's the Memorial Valley there, going back through the upper level of the trees there. So in general, you can't see the track unless the train is there. It's really more about the foreground scene.
One of the compromises we model railroaders make. Fold things up like a newspaper.
You have a magnificent railroad.
Thanks, I appreciate that. It's nice to have somebody visit, even virtually this year, because nobody else has.
I would have to say any railroad is nice is that if it can interchange with the NEB and W.
Yeah.
I actually remember cute little story with the I Love New York boxcar. I was stationed out in Aurora, Colorado, and I was at the one local hobby shop, and where the one guy was complaining that Lionel was being totally unrealistic with the I Love New York cars and all that. And I'm just like, I'm from the area. Yes, they have them. In fact, there was one that was about 2 miles down the road in the local railroad yard. It's like, he's like, no, like, you wouldn't believe me. It's like, go down in the railroad yard. There's one down there. Well, I would have to say it's a very beautiful layout, and I have another meeting to go to. So thank you very much, Mike.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys taking the time to hear about the layout and check it out. So it's my pleasure.
And we certainly do appreciate you taking the time to show it to us. It's really magnificent. You really, really have achieved something here.
Great, thank you.
I think it's a great layout with a very nice presentation overall. That was very informative.
It really was. It certainly was. It put it all in perspective for me in a part of the country that I've really never been to.
Yeah.
I like the way you've mixed all your different railroads. Would you say your railroad is more prototypical or more freelance?
I would say it's more towards the prototypical side in that the actual locomotives for the time period are accurate. The paint schemes are accurate. The locations are accurate, even if there's some compromise on track work or structures. And the operation plan is also prototypical. So these are the actual trains that ran at that particular time. That's how I built the op session. And that's kind of what drove the layout design as well. I didn't really start with a full design, but I did start with a concept of the different layout, different railroads that would run through the yard of St. Johnsbury, and that became the central point of the layout. And then I built out from there. Ideally, I mean, I've had to do some things over. I would try and have modeled more of the Canadian Pacific line because it really is just from staging to St. Johnsbury and then into staging again. So I would have liked to have had more of that. And since I built things, I thought of ways I could have done that. But I don't think it's something I want to change at this point. It'd be too drastic.
Yeah, you just have to have a bigger train room.
Yeah. There is more basement over there, but I'm not allowed to go there. Not with the train. Not with the trains anyway.
Well, Mike, I really want to thank you. I enjoyed the nostalgic trip back to where I grew up in northern Massachusetts, and many adventures up as far as the Moyne Valley, ski trips, and then working in the paper mill up in Groveton. But really thank you. You brought me back many years.
Oh, it's great. Glad to hear that. Thanks.
Anybody have any more questions for Mike? Well, Mike, thank you so much for being here this evening. I sure do appreciate it. I know we all do. And I say again, you just have done a beautiful presentation. You've got a magnificent model railroad. And thanks so much for taking the time to share it with us.
Sure. Appreciate it, Jim. Appreciate the comments and the chance to show it to everyone.
Well, next time this Saturday, December the 19th, Mr. Schultz, James Schultz, is going to be our featured modeler. And James, we're looking forward to seeing you and really do appreciate it. And thanks everybody for coming. I hope you had a good time and I hope you really enjoyed it. I know you must have because I know I did. So thanks again, Mike, and everybody.